I'm Diego Sanchez, COO of HW Media, and this is 10-Minute Talks. My guest today is Rich Weidel, CEO at Princeton Mortgage. Rich, welcome to 10-Minute Talks.
Hey, thanks for inviting me on, Diego. I'm excited to be here.
It's really good to have you on. Before we dive in, could you give a 30-second introduction of yourself and Princeton Mortgage?
Yeah, sure. So Princeton Mortgage is based in New Jersey. We are licensed in 44 states, and we focus on distributed retail, solely on that. Our headline is that we grew in 22, and we're also growing in 23. And our primary focus is on how do we bring more value to our realtor partners? How do we bring more value to originators and do so at a lower cost so we can gain market share?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with your recruitment strategy over the past 6 to 9 months. It seems like every other day you're announcing "Here we grow" on LinkedIn, which is a great trademark post. What do you think is attracting top branch managers and LOs to the Princeton Mortgage platform?
Yeah, it's a simple answer and really hard to execute. So we start with healthy things grow. Healthy things grow. And so we see that in all of nature, the universe, healthy things grow. So Princeton grew in 22, we're growing in 23, and our best years are ahead. So we think that like attracts like. We are attracting originators and branches who share this drive. We've not peaked. Every day we wake up and think about two things. How do we create more value for our realtor partners? And how do we create more value for originators at a lower cost? So it starts with also thinking about what is an originator or branch manager? A $30 million loan originator produces something like $1 million a year in revenue. Less than 91% of all businesses in America produce $1 million a year in revenues. So when we talk about top branch managers and LOs, we're not talking about just salespeople. We're talking about successful small businesses and how we bring more value to them relative to the cost. And so that focus is how you gain market share. And then how you do that is doing 15 things a little bit better than your competition that when you add it up, it makes a difference.
That's really interesting. And let's dive a little bit deeper into Princeton Mortgage itself. What channels does the company operate in, and what's your product focus from a mortgage perspective?
Yeah. So we operate in retail. Within retail, we run sort of three different models. We have the expense management branch, which is also often called the P&L model. We have a corporate LO model that is really reserved for experienced loan originators that don't need management but want a lot of support. And so that's a direct to corporate model, which allows for a lot of flexibility. And then we also run the corporate model within that. From a product standpoint, it's everything. And so we do the bulk of our loans are direct to the agencies. But over the last 3 years, we've added in all sorts of small community relationships. We've added wholesale outlets, non-QM outlets. And so really thinking about how to succeed in retail, your loan originators need to be able to do every loan. So it's a constant scramble. And we're adding somewhere between 4 and 7 different products or outlets every quarter for the last couple of years. Some of them aren't used a lot, but when you run into that realtor who needs that product, you need to be able to offer it to them so they don't go talk to the other loan originator down the street.
You mentioned realtor partnerships a couple of times, and of course, this is a heavy purchase market, and so those realtor relationships are really important. Every lender, or almost every lender, has access to the same CRMs, POSs, LOSs, and pricing that Princeton does. How are you differentiating Princeton for your realtor partners and other partners out there?
So that question is how you can bring mortgage CEOs and loan originators to their knees. What is your differentiated value proposition? Oh, we're direct to Fannie and Freddie. We've got this unique thing. We got great marketing. We got great training. Everybody does. A couple years ago, my dad dropped off all my stuff from my childhood home. Boxes of stuff. He put it on the porch, and I was going through it, and I picked up one of my old economics books, and I was flipping through the book. And I get to the point on demand elasticity, right? So we're talking about price sensitivity, and there's price elasticity where pricing doesn't matter, and then there's inelasticity, and there's price elasticity. The definition of price elasticity, the example was the mortgage industry, saying it really matters on rates. And I think we've learned over the last 2 years, rates really drive this business. And then you're right, we all have the same product, the same technology. It's what you do with those things that matter. So we kind of break it into 3 buckets. The first is, and we think this is the most important, the effortless mortgage. It's how you make people feel. We know all the statistics. Getting a mortgage is horrible. It hasn't changed. What's going on with it? Costs have gone up. The more technology we have, the more cumbersome the process in the whole industry. So we kind of track two things on this to see how are we doing with our end users, our borrowers. The first is our Princeton Promise. And that says every borrower gets multiple emails throughout the process that says, hey, if you're unhappy for any reason, click this button and we'll give you $1,000. Less than 0.5%, so half of 1% of our borrowers claim that. When we rolled that out 6 or 7 years ago, about 15% of our borrowers were claiming that Princeton Promise. Every year we've whittled it down so that, like, I'm talking about 15 borrowers out of every 4,000 actually say, hey, I was unhappy. That's led to a customer satisfaction score of a 93 lifetime NPS. So we can say, hey, we're demonstrably doing better with the end user, our borrowers. That's about making them feel good and having a great process. So the question is, like, how do you do that? Everybody says they've got great ops. Well, what does that mean? Not everybody can have great ops right now. And so we even say, what are the most important things in a purchase market that drives great fulfillment? And for us, we've accomplished 90% of our eligible loans are clear to close in 21 days or less. This has led to a 33% faster closing time compared to all users on Encompass and Ellie Mae at Princeton Mortgage. And sometimes we're often number one in the country when it comes to purchase closing times. We track clear to closes because the closing date is driven by the real estate transaction. So we focus on what we can control within that. We've also essentially eliminated late stage declines and delayed purchases. And so those are the three things. Are you cleared to close quickly, 90% in 21 days, no late stage declines, and no delayed purchases? But that's not the point. Those are the things that we measure. Why does that matter? It matters because we're in a market that we need to drive more realtor relationships. And so on average, the loan originators at Princeton Mortgage are adding 1.2 new realtor referrals a month right now. So that means a realtor closes a loan with them that they've never worked with before. In Q2 alone, 75% of our originators will close a loan with 3 realtors they've never worked with before. So we do all of that work and all of those different things. And the end thing we track, how many new realtor referral partners are our loan originators adding? And we're adding 1 a month right now.
That's really interesting and very important stats to track. And has that had an impact on repeat business to the extent that you can measure that?
Yeah, so then we drive a lot into the lifetime value of a customer. And so we don't think about it as a transaction. We really say we focus on realtors that are doing more than 8 buy sides per year. We think of them as sort of the full-time professionals. In any given market with about 300,000 people, there's about 100 to 125 realtors that are doing more than 8 buy sides a year. So it's a relatively small pool of realtors. Oftentimes, if you ask somebody, say, how many realtors are doing more than 8 buy sides in your market? They'll say 2,000, 1,500. The number is like 150. So when you really boil it down to that 150 and start to say, what's important to those realtors? And then you focus on that, that's how you can drive this type of value. And so we focus on, there's relationship selling. Hey, you like me, I like you. But then there's value proposition selling, which is, hey, that's great that we're friends, loan originator and realtor. But beyond that, how are you bringing value to the relationship? And we really focus in on, of course, we want to help them to grow their business and sales and life and all that type of stuff. But we look at our fundamental job is that you have certainty of the execution when you work with Princeton Mortgage, and we will make you look like a rock star. And so if you look at the sort of science of referrals, why do people make a referral? It's if you make me look good. So we want to make that realtor look good by doing an amazing job with that borrower. I think the thing that's not changed, and this is why the mortgage business and the real estate business over the last 30 years are fundamentally unchanged in the way that they work. 70% of buyers find their realtor through a referral from their sphere of influence or a past realtor relationship. I was guest lecturing a class at UC Boulder in their prop tech course, and I said that, and people were like, that can't be true. I said, okay, who's bought a home in this class? You know, it's half a dozen kids that have bought a class or an investment property, something like that. How did you find your realtor? My dad recommended, my neighbor, my cousin. So it's sphere of influence. Then 70% of buyers find their loan originator from their realtor. So that's the name of the game that we're playing. And how do you create more value in that?
Yeah, that's incredible. And it's been very consistent over time. Despite all the direct consumer technology efforts out there, it's very consistent in terms of referrals.
And you can go back and look at, I'll call it the intellectuals, the McKinsey reports and all these things over the last 20 years. And every couple of years, it's the death of the loan originator and the death of the realtor. Yet we haven't seen those numbers change.
Yeah, it's really true. So let's peer into the crystal ball just a little bit before we end. When do you see this housing market turning and perking back up a little?
So I don't believe anybody that tells you they know what's happening, so I'm not going to join the crew of it. Our view is that we've experienced when rates approach, the biggest problem is the lock-in effect, right? So we need more listings. That's the fundamental problem. And so when we saw rates in the fives back in kind of March when we were getting there, we saw it opening up. People that had that 3% interest rate were then willing to list their home and do that. So the question is, when do we get towards fives? And I think there's obviously there's the underlying what the Fed's doing in treasury rates that the mortgage rates are based on. But there's also this big question of the spread between treasuries and MBS pricing, which is at all-time highs right now. So we don't even necessarily need the underlying interest rates to come down. We also can have that second lever of the spreads tightening. I think there's a lot of volatility that's priced into that. So when we have some steadiness, whether it's at 7% or 6%, I think we'll see some easing off of it. I think that could be in the next 3 months. It could also be in the next 2.5 years. And I think, we're definitely, hope is not a plan. Let's plan that this is higher rates for longer and fewer transactions, and make sure that our model is adjusted to it and that our originators are able to do the amount of business they need to make it through this war of attrition. And we're all planting the seeds for tomorrow. And you see the haves and the have-nots, and those that are gaining market share come out the other side of it. And so that's what we're focused on, the long haul, that it's going to be difficult, and how do we continue to gain market share through this.
Rich, it's been so great chatting with you today. Thanks for joining me.
You bet, Diego. I had a great time. I appreciate the invitation.